142. That's the number. I was going through the stack for this deep dive, and that number just kept jumping out at me. It just doesn't compute.
It's an incredibly low figure when you think about who we're actually talking about.
Incredibly low is an understatement. We're talking about Abu Bakr as Siddiq. I mean, this was the Prophet Muhammad's father-in-law, his closest companion, the second of the two in the cave, the first caliph. He was there for everything. And yet, in this huge, sprawling library of hadith, he's only credited with about 142 narrations.
And just to give you some perspective on that, a companion like Abu Hurairah, who was only around for the last, 3 years of the Prophet's life, he narrated over 5,000.
Exactly. So the guy who was there from day one is practically silent in the record, and the guy who shows up at the very end is doing all the talking. That can't just be a historical accident, can it? It feels like a loose thread.
That's precisely it. It's the thread you have to pull. That silence isn't an accident, it's a signal. And it really forces us to confront the core tension of this whole story.
Which is?
The battle to define Abu Bakr. Are we looking at the historical Abu Bakr or the theological Abu Bakr? Is he the pious saint, so cautious he chose silence over error? Or is he a political operator, suppressing information to consolidate power?
And that's our mission for this deep dive. We're not here to pick a side. We're doing a kind of forensic audit.
Yeah.
We got the Sunni sources, the Shia counter-narratives, secular academics like Madeleine.
All of them.
And we're going to try and figure out how one single person can be seen as both the savior of Islam and, at the same time, the architect of alienation.
And it all starts with that silence because, the interesting thing is the sources suggest he didn't start out silent at all.
Right. This is the burning incident. I found this in al-Dahabi's work, and it reads like a thriller.
Yes.
It's intense.
It is. So the report says that after the Prophet died, Abu Bakr had collected about 500 hadiths. He had them written down on scrolls.
So arguably the most valuable documents on the planet at that moment.
Absolutely. But then the report says he spends an entire night just tossing and turning, can't sleep. His daughter Aisha even asks him what's wrong.
And he doesn't tell her.
Not right away. But in the morning, he asks for the scrolls. And he sets them on fire. He destroys everything.
Okay, so let's put on the Orthodox Sunni hat for a second. The explanation is epistemic caution, right? He's as Siddiq, the truthful. He was terrified he might have misheard something or written it down wrong.
That's the view. It's presented as an act of supreme piety, accuracy over volume. He'd rather say nothing than say something that might be even slightly wrong.
But if you're a critic or a secular historian, that story has some massive problems.
Huge problem. I mean, think about it. If the Prophet's absolute best friend, the truthful one, couldn't trust his own notes taken from the source,
then how can anyone trust the thousands of narrations from other people written down 200 years later?
Precisely. It basically pulls the rug out from under the entire hadith tradition. If the gold standard is unreliable, what does that say about everything else?
It's like the CEO of a company shredding all the files right before a merger. It doesn't look good.
And that's exactly where the Shia perspective comes in. They'd say this wasn't about piety at all. It was about politics.
Political survival.
Yes. This is a moment of total chaos. What if some of those 500 hadiths contain statements from the Prophet favoring Ali or describing a different kind of leadership? Burning them isn't just caution, it's erasing the opposition's evidence.
You control the narrative by silencing the source material.
And he didn't just burn his own. There are other reports, where he actively tells people to stop narrating hadiths. He says, between us and you is the book of God, a Qur'an-only approach.
Which on the surface sounds very pious. Let's just stick to the main scripture.
Right. But in practice, it creates a vacuum. If there are no prophetic precedents to follow, who gets to interpret the Qur'an?
The state. The caliph.
Exactly. And that vacuum gets filled almost immediately by the crisis at Saqifa. This is where it all comes to a head.
Saqifa. I mean, just the name is controversial. The prophet has just died. His body is literally still being prepared for burial by Ali and the immediate family.
A moment of just profound private grief.
And while that's happening, across town, the Ansar, the Medinans, are gathering in a covered courtyard. Saqifa Bani Saida.
And they are not there to mourn. They're there to elect their own leader. Their logic is, the Prophet was from Mecca, he's gone now, so leadership should return to us, the locals who supported him.
So Abu Bakr and Umar hear about this, and they drop everything. They don't wait for the funeral, they run to that meeting.
They do, and this is where the story just splits into two completely different realities.
Okay, so the Sunni defense is emergency stabilization.
Right. The argument is that if they hadn't gone, the Ansar would have picked their own guy, the Meccans would never have accepted him, and the whole community would have descended into civil war before the Prophet was even buried.
So in this telling, Abu Bakr is the hero. He's not grabbing power, he's saving the community from itself.
Yes, he's jumping on the grenade. But then you have the other side. You have historians like Madelung who look at the mechanics of what happened and they don't see an emergency meeting, they see a coup.
A coup is a strong word.
But look at the facts. Who wasn't there? The Prophet's own family. Ali wasn't there. Most of the senior companions weren't there. It was a backroom deal pushed through by a handful of people. Umar just grabs Abu Bakr's hand, pledges allegiance, and suddenly it's a done deal.
And didn't Umar himself kind of admit that later? The term falta?
Yes, this is so important. Years later, Umar gives a speech and calls the pledge at Saqafa a fault, a hasty, ill-conceived act. He literally says, God protected the Muslims from its evil.
Wow. That's practically an admission that the process was illegitimate.
It's a stunning admission. But for the Shia, it's worse than just a flawed process. They believe the Prophet had already designated Ali as his successor at a place called Ghadir Qum.
So for them, Saqafa isn't a political mistake.
It's a theological betrayal, a usurpation of a divine command, and the fact that it happened while Ali was preoccupied with the funeral. They don't see that as a coincidence, they see it as a calculated power grab.
So Abu Bakr becomes caliph, but immediately he has a major problem with the Prophet's family. And that brings us to Fadak. This wasn't just about a piece of land, was it?
No, Fadak was the proxy war for the caliphate. It was a rich oasis. It generated a lot of income. Fatima, the Prophet's daughter, goes to Abu Bakr and claims it as her inheritance.
And he denies her. He cites this one hadith that conveniently only he seems to have heard.
We prophets do not leave inheritance. What we leave is charity. Now just stop and think about that. Fatima is his daughter. Ali is his son-in-law. They live with him. Are we supposed to believe neither of them ever heard this fundamental rule about their own family?
It seems unlikely. And there's a Quranic issue too, isn't there? The Quran says Solomon inherited from David. They were both prophets.
That's the Shia argument in a nutshell. They say Abu Bakr's hadith directly contradicts the Quran. They argue this was never about religious law. It was about defunding the opposition.
Economic sanctions.
Exactly. Take away their source of income and you neutralize any potential political challenge. And the personal cost was immense. We don't need conspiracy theories for this. It's right there in Sahih Bukhari, the most authentic Sunni collection.
What does it say?
It says Fatima became angry with Abu Bakr and she refused to speak to him ever again. She died 6 months later, still not speaking to him.
She goes to the caliph.
She did. And she asked to be buried at night so that he couldn't come to her funeral. Now, this is a huge theological problem because there's another famous hadith where the Prophet says, Fatima is a part of me. Whoever angers her angers me.
So Abu Bakr angered Fatima, which means he angered the Prophet, which means he angered God. That's a devastating chain of logic.
Sunni scholars have to perform some, pretty complex maneuvers to get around that, but it gets even darker.
The raid on the house.
Yes. When Ali and his supporters initially refused to pledge allegiance, the sources say Abu Bakr sent Umar to their house to force the issue.
And we're not talking about a polite knock?
Not according to some sources. The accounts vary wildly. Sunni sources downplay it, maybe admit a verbal threat was made. But the Shia sources, they describe a violent assault, the door being forced open, crushing Fatima behind it, causing her to miscarry her unborn son.
That is just horrific. It turns the whole narrative on its head. Is there any corroboration for that level of violence?
It is probably the single most divisive event. Sunnis reject it as a complete fabrication. Secular historians like Madelung, though, they see evidence that a forceful confrontation did happen, even if the details are hard to verify. But the most haunting piece of evidence, it comes from Abu Bakr himself. On his deathbed, he's reported to have said he had 3 major regrets. And one of them was, I wish I had not violated the house of Fatima, even if they had declared war on me.
That sounds like a confession.
It certainly sounds like the words of a man with a very heavy conscience. It implies something happened at that house that he knew had crossed a line.
So at the same time, you have this deep internal fracture. The state itself is exploding outwards with the Ridda Wars, the so-called wars of apostasy.
And this is where you see Abu Bakr, the state builder, emerge. The moment the Prophet dies, Tribes across Arabia say, okay, our deal was with Muhammad, he's gone, the deal's off, we're not paying the zakat tax to Medina anymore.
Which, if you're a political scientist, makes perfect sense. The leader of the Confederation died.
Right, but Abu Bakr reframes it. He doesn't call it tax evasion or political secession, he calls it apostasy. He says if you withhold the tax, you have left Islam.
That's a massive escalation. I mean, even Umar pushed back on that, didn't he?
He did. Umar said, how can we fight people who still pray and say there is no God but Allah? But Abu Bakr was absolutely rigid. He said prayer and zakat are a single package. You can't have one without the other. And that decision, that's what forges the Islamic State as a centralized power that can use force to ensure compliance.
And the main tool of that force was Khalid ibn al-Walid, the sword of Allah.
Khalid is such a complicated figure, a military genius, no doubt, but absolutely ruthless. And that leads us to the scandal with Malik ibn Nuwayda.
This story really complicates that simple, pious image of Abu Bakr.
It does. So Malik is a Muslim tribal chief. He prays, he's a believer, but his tribe hasn't sent the tax yet. Khalid's army captures him. By all accounts, Malik affirms his faith, but Khalid has him executed anyway.
Okay, that's already terrible.
It gets much, much worse. That same night, Khalid marries Malik's beautiful widow.
Wait, the same night?
Same night. I mean, under any legal or moral code, it looks like he killed the husband to take the wife. It was a massive scandal. Umar was livid. He demanded Khalid be punished for murder and adultery.
So what does Abu Bakr do? The man's so pious, he burned his own notes.
He protects Khalid. He pays blood money to Malik's family, which is sort of an admission of wrongdoing, but he keeps Khalid in command of the army. He says, I will not sheathe the sword that God has drawn.
That is pure realpolitik.
It is. It's the decision of an emperor, not a saint. He knew he needed Khalid's military skill to hold the state together, so he chose security over justice. This is where the pious Siddiq persona really collides with the pragmatic ruler.
So how do we bring this all together? The Burn Hadiths, Saqifa, Fatima, the Ridda Wars. How do you reconcile these two very different portraits of the same man?
I think you have to stop trying to see him as one thing. He's a figure of preservation for Sunnis. He preserved the state, he preserved the unity of the Arabs, he preserved the text of the Qur'an, he saved the container.
But for Shias?
He's a figure of innovation, and not in a good way. He innovated a form of leadership, the caliphate, that they believe bypassed God's chosen successor. He innovated a state that alienated the prophet's own family. So for them, he might have saved the container, but he spilled the sacred contents.
It all comes back to these competing titles and images. The man in the cave versus the man on the throne.
I know, exactly. Sinus points to the Quranic verse about the cave, where the prophet tells him, do not grieve, as proof of his special status. But Shias look at that same verse and ask, well, why was he grieving in the first place? Why was he afraid? And they contrast that with Ali, who was bravely sleeping in the prophet's bed to fool assassins.
So even the scripture itself becomes a battleground.
It always is. And we have to remember, the histories we're reading were written down much later, mostly under dynasties that had a vested interest in promoting a pro-caliphate, pro-Abu Bakr narrative to legitimize their own rule.
Right.
But the little details, the 142 hadiths, the falta, the anger of Fatima, those are the echoes of the counter-narrative that managed to survive.
I think. I want to leave you with one final thought, something that I just can't shake. We started with that fire. 500 reports. Written down by the man closest to the prophet, and he turned them all to ash.
The great what-if of history.
Just think, if Abu Bakr had not burned those notes, if those 500 narrations were here today, would we be looking at a completely different Islam? Would the Sunni-Shia split even exist? Or would those scrolls have just confirmed everything one side or the other already believes?
We'll never know. And maybe that was the point. By burning the specifics, he forced the community to rely on the general text of the Qur'an and the state structure he was building, whether that was an act of incredible piety or an act of incredible political genius. Well, that's for you to decide.
Silence that speaks louder than any words. Thanks for diving with us.
My pleasure. Thank you.